Next is our juvenile department, and Christina McMahon is the director of the juvenile department, and she's coming forward. And this is tab 14 in your binder.
Good afternoon, Chair Parks, Chair Smith, members of the Budget Committee. I'm Christina McMahon. I am the Juvenile Department Director here in Clackamas County. And I would like to just go ahead and refer to you. I think you said tab 13, Gary.
I'm sorry, tab 13. I apologize. Tab 13. I'm ahead of myself.
That's right.
Okay, I was like, uh-oh.
My apologies.
No worries. Thank you. I would like to refer you to tab 13, page 5, to go over key parts of our department summary by fund document. And that document provides a high-level look at our department. As you can see, we have 4 lines of business: administration, accountability, public safety, and reformation, and 2 programs under each of those lines of business. Those lines of business were designed around the actual Oregon Revised Statute, the delinquency code, which mandates that the juvenile department engage in certain categories of activities. So that's why we broke them down in that way. I'd like to point you to the item on, let's see, the second column on the right, going from the right, fiscal year 22-23, the total budget column. The last entry in the gray, it is talking about the percentage of increase for our department this year. And the overall increase to our department budget is 3.3%. And I wanted to just break down what that was for you. This increase includes a 9.1% increase in the cost for our 13 contracted juvenile detention beds that we contract with Multnomah County to offer at the Donald D. Long Detention Facility, and the increased cost of personnel due to the estimated 4.5% COLA that was included in our proposal. So that explains the 3.3. Next, I'd like to refer you to the column that is marked fiscal year 22-23 FTE. And you will see down there, we have a decrease in our FTE of 4.4%, and it actually is, that represents cutting 2 positions in our department's budget. So we're going from 45 FTE down to 43 FTE. And we did this in order to maintain vital mandated services in our department and stay within the constraint that we were given by the county. And we were able to do this using vacant FTEs that were in our department. We analyzed to make sure that we could still perform our services at the current service level with the reduced FTE. So that's why we have that reduction. Next, going over to the yellow column all the way to the right, second line from the bottom, this notes the increase in cost in our general fund support in our budget. And you'll see that states we had an increase of $191,949, which represents a 2% increase. And that, once again, we were given the directions that we would receive 2% additional to help towards our increased personnel costs to maintain our operations. And as I stated, we went ahead and cut some things in our budget so that we could stay within that extra 2% that we were receiving from the county. So next I'd like to go to tab 13.7. That document is a summary of revenue and expenses for the juvenile department. And I'd like to I'll just start from the top on this one. If you look at the second row down all the way to the right, percentage change from prior year budget, you will see that we note that it's an 11.3% change for federal, state, local, all other gifts and donations. So the reason that went up is we have some one-time only state funding that we received We learned after our budget process was completed last year that we would be getting an increase in some of our money that we receive from the state. So that represents about 80% of this dollar amount increase. And then about 20% is an increase in federal funds, because this is the first year we've been able to access some of the DOJ, Department of Justice funding, that our department has historically received. There was some litigation going. We got through that, and County Council said we could go ahead and accept that funding. So that explains the federal portion of the increase. As I noted, these are being used for a one-time only program. The state funding, we have to use it for things related to the services that we offer to young people. So we decided we would go ahead and do a one-year pilot. We've already started the planning for it, but it's going to be implemented in the new fiscal year. It's a one-year only school-based pilot to address substance abuse and behavioral health issues with young people in the schools before they escalate to the point of needing to be formally involved with our department. So that's what we are using that one-time only money for. We felt this was a very important area to concentrate on and try to learn how we can best approach the substance abuse issues that we're seeing with young people, which are increasing at a staggering rate. Anecdotally, the young people that are coming into our department in the last couple of years, we've seen a very large increase in substance abuse. I think that could be tied to the accessibility of drugs in our county and some of the impacts of Measure 110. So anyway, moving down, the next point I'd like to share with you, general fund support. You can see we are at 2%. I already covered that, but we held within the constraint we were given in our directions for budget preparation this year. Next, I will move down to materials and services. You will see that's noted in that column as 7.7% increase. And I've already mentioned the 13 contracted beds. That is our largest single contract that we have in the juvenile department. And then also the use of the one-time only funding that we're receiving for that pilot project, that's a contracted service. So that is also covered in our materials and services. And then there's a small increase in our allocated charges with the county. So that makes up that number. And then if we move down, our total expense was an increase of 3.3%, which I mentioned earlier. And then lastly, the very last entry here says a decrease of 4.4% for our full-time equivalent FTE costs by reducing 2 FTEs. And that explains that one. So those are the two documents that I was asked to present on. I did want to share, I know I've mentioned the detention increase a couple of times. I wanted to let you know our current daily rate is $336 a day per bed for our county. It is going up on July 1 to $367 a day. And it's highly likely next year we will be looking at a substantial increase for Multnomah County because they believe that, and we still have a lot of work to try to figure this out, but even at $367 a day, that's substantially below what their true cost of serving young people in the detention facility is. They calculate it to be at approximately $500 a day as of right now. So we started out this year looking at a $500 a day rate. We were able to work with them and negotiate and come to an agreement at $367, which was still more than we wanted, obviously, to pay, but a lot better than $500 a day. So one of the concerns that we have had is during the pandemic, we have been underutilizing our detention. We've been intentionally trying to keep kids out of detention because of the risk and the concern of kids being exposed to COVID, especially early on when we did not have a vaccine and we didn't know how things would spread within the facility, et cetera. Also, law enforcement has referred less kids to us. We're seeing an uptick now as things are opening back up. But it's really hard to predict because we've had 2 years of really anomaly conditions in public safety. And also even without outside of COVID, we've had the Measure 110 impact, which decriminalized some of the crimes that would have been previously referred to our department. So we have been very hesitant to cut the number of our contracted beds because we don't know what the impacts will be when the pendulum perhaps swings back. We do know that the kids in our community are experiencing a severe increase in behavioral health, unmet mental health needs, as I've already mentioned, substance abuse. So we know that the likelihood of getting those beds back if we give them up is pretty slim. So we're hesitant to cut. I know that our situation as a county, we're going to have to make cuts next year from what our county administrator has shared. So I just wanted to make you aware that is our biggest contract. That might be something that we need to look at cutting in the future. But we will be analyzing the data related to kids that we are putting in detention and what those numbers are, and also exploring different alternatives that allow us to keep our community safe without utilizing as much detention. So we're going to be looking, we are already started in that process. So just wanted to make you aware that's something on the horizon that could be significantly impactful to how we divvy up the limited resource that we have access to make sure that we're keeping the community safe. So that is all I had. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, so we have Commissioner Smith and then Commissioner Schrader.
Thank you for this insightful presentation. I've always appreciated that Multnomah County offered this service to us, but they have to charge what they have to charge. We can't expect them to give us something that's less than their costs. I understand that, and that's very unfair. So what is the overall driver, do you know, of the increased costs per day on these beds?
Actually, I would say overwhelmingly, if I had the director of Multnomah County here, she would say the impact of kids coming into the facility who have significant mental health and behavioral issues, severe. Juvenile justice has had a tremendous impact on the cost because across the state, many residential programs have had to close. Providers can't operate their programs with what Medicaid and state reimbursements are. So what has happened is we've lost many residential programming options that used to be available for youth. We've lost almost all the nearly all the residential treatment beds for youth with substance abuse issues. So what ends up happening is those kids end up being transferred to the juvenile justice system. The juvenile directors across the state say we're the de facto behavioral health, mental health residential programming option for kids in Oregon, which is not what any of us want. So what happens is we have kids who end up going to detention that are suicidal, actively suicidal, psychotic. When a young person is suicidal, they have to assign staff to be on what's called constant watch with that young person, and that is very expensive. That means one individual employee watching, complete eyes on at all times, the young person who is suffering from the behavioral health issues.
Thank you for that. So with the causation, to me, comes to mind. That is the why, but the other why is increased mental health crisis in our youth.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what is the cause of that?
I think the cause of that is COVID has had a substantial impact on young people. They were out, many of them were out of school, doing online school, or some going to a hybrid situation. So a lot of times the social safety nets that are set up for young people tend to exist in their schools, and they've suffered isolation, a lack of access to those supports, families in crisis, parents who, especially at the beginning of COVID, we saw a lot of folks that were displaced from employment. So I really think COVID, we've seen a major spike. But I don't want to make it sound like it's only COVID. We had a problem with our ability to access and serve young people with these types of issues before COVID. COVID has really exacerbated it.
Very interesting, thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner
welcome.
Schrader and then Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, thanks for being here today, and I really, you do great work.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you, Commissioner Schrader.
But I had a question about the pilot program.
Yes.
That's one-time money, and it's going
Yes.
to be geared towards substance abuse, mental health, which obviously what we've heard.
Yes.
So how are you going to maintain that program? Are you
Well-
working with any entities? If it's one-time money
Yes.
and it's a pilot project, what's the long-term plan with that?
Well, we are working with, it's actually a pilot in the Gladstone School District.
Okay.
And the pilot is, when I said it was contracted, it's with a culturally responsive provider who will be working directly with the counseling staff and employees in the high school. And so the part of the pilot is being right out of the gate as we've been planning this, including the school folks in our training, everything that we're doing. What we're doing is called the the SBIRT. It's a screening up front with kids to see if they're having any of these issues that I've identified. And it's a validated tool that's been used in many jurisdictions across the country to really help triage which kids actually need intervention and help right now. So we're going to be doing that in concert with the school folks, and we are aware of some upcoming funding opportunities that will be likely available through the state after this, but we have made it very clear to the school district, this is one-time only money. So if there isn't state funding available, they will have to work to figure out how to keep this going.
Okay.
But we do think, because of some of the other dynamics going on, there might be new grant opportunities that could help keep this going.
Yeah, and the one-time money's coming from the DOJ, did I hear that correctly?
No, the
No, it
DOJ
was-
money is our federal money. This is coming down through the Youth Development Council and our state agency.
Okay.
And that's a division of the Oregon Department of Education, and also extra money that came through the Oregon Youth Authority.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, so I recognize that the safety of communities, the safety of families, the safety of the juveniles themselves that need help, it applies to everyone, and especially in environments that are in schools and so forth, their circles. So I assume that we're talking about really everyone, even though we're only helping youth. But from a safety standpoint, under the umbrella of ensure safe and healthy communities, how would you define the uniqueness of that compared to that of adults who maybe have similar offenses or vices?
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Savas. I think if I'm understanding you, you're commenting on kids don't exist in isolation. They're part of this family unit. And when the family dynamics kick in, that obviously has an impact on young people. So you can't just treat the young person in isolation. I'm hearing you say that. So you want to know how that's different from adults who have the same issues, like a behavioral health issue presenting?
Well, I guess maybe I'll just expand a little bit. So I understand that you're here presenting under ensure safe and healthy communities,
Yes.
right? And I know that impacts families, communities, as well as the youth we're trying to treat, and they're they're our future. Kids are our future, so it's an investment worth making.
Yes.
But how would you differentiate or say that let's say a youth becomes young adult, and pretty soon they're no longer juveniles, right?
Right.
And now they're out in society as adults, and let's just say that they didn't turn out so good and they're going down the wrong path. My point is, why would we not also look at, this is just more of an opinion, not from your department, but from your opinion, why would we not look at that same set of circumstances for adults?
Well, I guess my opinion is just because somebody turns 18 doesn't mean that their brain is magically fully developed. In fact, the research shows us that most people's brains aren't fully developed till they're in their mid-20s. So there is a movement across the country to have, it goes by different names, but the older adolescent movement or the young adult transition. So you're absolutely right. There are young people that are on the caseloads that are in our community corrections departments that the only thing separating them is that chronological age that's on a piece of paper. It's not that they don't have the same issues and the same needs. So my opinion on that is adults, so there comes a time when adults' brains are fully formed, and they are held by our statutes to a higher culpability, so to speak, for their behaviors and their choices. That doesn't mean that adults who are addicted to substances don't have very similar needs that have often carried over from their youth into adulthood. So one of the parts of our mission is talking about helping young people successfully transition into adulthood. We're trying to make sure that they don't cross over, still having untreated and unmet needs that carry over and drive them deeper into being dependent on various government agencies and services. So my opinion is it's different because kids and adults are at different developmental levels and can be held to a higher level, adults can be held to a higher level of responsibility. But yes, I totally agree that it's not exclusive to young people. Adults need the help too. And a lot of times we see kids who have parents who aren't able to fully support the way they want to because of addiction, because of unmet mental health needs and behavioral health needs. So the cycle just continues. So we can't treat any part of the family or the people in our community in isolation. We have to think about it holistically.
Yeah. The last piece is that what percentage of your population is afflicted with drug abuse?
Oh, wow. Usually they don't come in for a referral for a specific drug offense, especially now with the way the laws have changed. But I would say when we're talking about substance abuse, I would say probably 70 to 75% of the young people that we're getting referrals for and taking through our court process have some level of substance abuse engagement or issues going on that are exacerbating or driving the behavior.
Thank you, and thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
Mr. Karn?
Thank you. You answered some of my question with your last answer, but this is a good thing. You're showing under accomplishments that their recidivism rate is about 24% lower than the statewide average.
Yes.
Why is that? What are you doing, or what would you attribute that to?
Well, I think that Clackamas County has a long-standing reputation. It's one of the reasons I wanted to come here 6 years ago for really investing in its juvenile department and providing a variety of services to young people, often when nobody else in the state was doing it or being one of the first. So I think that's one. We've invested in this as a county. Another piece is that the department is very committed historically and under my time here with making sure we are paying attention to the research and to our data and doing what is proven to work with kids. So I'll give you a really basic example of that. We do, when kids are referred to our department or when they go through our diversion program or they walk in the door at our juvenile intake and assessment center, we do a risk assessment on every single youth who comes through our doors. And I know I've gotten a lot of questions about this. I'm thinking about you, Commissioner Schrader, a couple of years ago, asking me specifically about risk assessments. I know that seems very basic, oh, we're going to assess a young person, see what their risk factors are that are driving this delinquent behavior, and then look at what their needs are. It is basic, but it's absolutely foundational and fundamental. I was just in a meeting down in Medford for our association last week, and one of the Oregon Youth Authority researchers presented data from across the state, and our department had the highest percentage of actually doing these risk assessments that I've described in the state. So when we do that, we can figure out what do we need to target, what do we need to focus on, what do we need to help this young person and their family with. And we're not just throwing things up against the wall hoping something can stick. So it sounds really basic, but it is one of the basics that really drives everything else that we do when we're designing the services for young people. So I'm very proud of our recidivism rate, and I think that it really goes back to we take the time to assess kids, we reassess kids, and then we design an individualized case plan to help them have that successful transition into adulthood.
Great, thank you.
You're
And I'm
welcome.
glad it's working.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being here and for what you do and for keeping Clackamas County on the rising edge of the needs of our teens. So thank you so much. So I see no other cards up. We have no other questions. So thanks again for being here today.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate your time.